Hello guys, okay, only one is there. We'll just wait for a moment. Let's see who is in the waiting room, and then I'll admit them. Yeah. So we'll anyway start at around 5, maybe something on that time. Okay. So right now we'll move on to Ihbas 2024 paper. Okay, so I put it into Microsoft Forms. So it has a feature called practice mode. So we'll be using that. Okay. So has anyone applied for Ihbas last year and has attempted this particular question paper? It's set A, by the way. Has anyone attempted it? Amana, okay. Yeah. Amana, if you could tell us, like, I don't know, what was the cutoff for Ihbas last year? Like the cutoff to get in for general category. Any idea? Oh, 94, 95. Okay. So was it the highest mark or was it like the minimum cutoff? Minimum. Okay, good. Yeah, that makes sense because the paper was pretty easy. So that means even if you have read a lot of things, you may have to kind of lose out on the competition. So that's one thing. So how many seats are there for Ihbas for general category? Any idea? Because I've not looked at the prospectus of this. We're discussing Ihbas because we have 5 is for general grade. So we have the exam upcoming in the next month, August 31st to be precise, right? All right, so we'll get to it. So are you guys able to see the screen where the question is there? It's a screen seen for the Microsoft Forms with Ihbas. Okay, cool. Right. So what I want to do is, anyway, we have 4 options. What happened? So we have 4 options. So what we can do is we can go do this live. I want you to react. Okay, so there's a option called react. So what you can do is you can like for option A, and then second is love for option B. Third is applause for option C, and then laugh for option D. So maybe that would clear what you want. So yeah, love would be for option B. We're just going from left to right, whatever is there, right? I have not even started. I'll just put it in the chat box for clarification. Okay. So the first one is like. So I'm just give me a minute. So I'll just put it in the chat for clarification. So I'm just going to click on the answer and we'll anyway like know what the answer is. So and lastly, laugh. Laugh was the 4th option, right? Yep. So put the key in the chat box so you can just take a look at it. Right. So like for option A, heart for option B, applause or clap for option C, and laugh for option D. Okay. So we'll go at it one at a time, and I'll also try to explain so what the answer is. Okay. So the questions, as far as I've tried yesterday, so they're pretty much straightforward, but there were also questions which were kind of difficult. So which I myself have not like come across so often. So this also reinforces what we discussed in the last session, that you need a breadth of information rather than depth, because you're going to see that all questions are like very straightforward, there's nothing at the level of analysis or comparison. If you know Bloom's taxonomy, so description, analysis, application, and then even creation, those are higher levels. So these are more at the lower level of description and very rarely analysis. Okay. Anyway, so what is the first question? So what do you think is the first question's answer? Yes, you can start reacting now. Send the reacts. You can keep your mics off for the time being. I think Kevin. Sorry, I had to mute you. Okay, so it's option B, right? It's pretty straightforward. Clinical psychologists do not deal with industrial applications. They may be asked to if the organization has some sort of, let's say, mental illness going on, stress management or something. They usually do not deal with behavioral changes in animals. That would be maybe an evolutionary psychologist or an animal psychologist, like behavior therapist or something, not organization management also, right? So of course, you see the answer is correct. So we'll quickly move on to the next one. So we'll not spend much time on the two easy ones. All right. So now this is Erickson's stages. So which development stage is associated with trust versus mistrust? If you know Erickson's, you're gonna like be able to have at least 4-5 questions correct, because they were like 4-5 questions or 4 questions which are asked from this. So everyone is saying B. So of course it's B, because I remember it by the acronym T-A 4 I's GE, like tiger. That's what I remember. So T for trust versus mistrust, A for autonomy, I for, wait, what was first I? Industry, right? Initiative, sorry, initiative versus guilt, and then industry versus inferiority, identity versus role confusion, isolation versus intimacy. Then you have generativity versus stagnation, and E being ego despair was, sorry, ego integration versus despair. So this is one acronym I used. So they asked trust versus mistrust. It's the very first stage. So that'll be infancy. Okay. So yeah, this will be also an easy one. Which part of the brain is associated with cognitive functions such as problem solving? It's pretty easy. Okay, frontal lobe. Right, I'll briefly tell you what are the various lobes functions. So occipital lobe is predominantly used for what? Visual processing. The primary visual cortex is there. So it's visual processing. Temporal lobe is predominantly for audition and speech reception, language basically, and also memory. Parietal lobe is mostly for spatial navigation, your somatic perception, okay, and where your body is in space, right? And also visuospatial aspects in combination with the occipital lobe. So frontal lobe has several functions, one of which is problem solving. It also has executive functions, which is a broader term which includes problem solving. Response inhibition is there. Maintaining attention is also there. Speech production is also part of frontal lobe, the left part particularly. And then you also have motoric responses, right? So that is also a part of frontal lobe. So they've simply asked problem solving, you can give frontal lobe. Yeah. So next is groupthink. This question is way too simple. So it's almost the length of the question makes the answer stand out here. So what is the correct answer here? B, right? Groupthink is like where, because of the group processes, people think in, conformity, but conformity is not the right word. That is a process through which it happens. It discourages deviance from the group's norm, right? So in a decision-making task, people think along the way the group thinks. People get carried away, and because of the group pressures, they don't dissent, even if they internally feel that they have a different opinion, they would not. So that is groupthink. It is not individual thinking, it's not brainstorming, it's not peer pressure. Kind of related, but it is not peer pressure. Okay. Right. So we're going to disorders. So which disorder is characterized by persistent sadness? So we also call it pervasive low mood for persistent sadness. Loss of interest, or otherwise called anhedonia. So which disorder? So it is not schizophrenia, it's depression. But you may also know that after schizophrenia, people may go into depression, which is called post-schizophrenic depression. They may also ask questions based on that. Okay. So in OCD, there may be comorbid depression. In bipolar, depression is one of the episodes, but it is also characterized by manic phases, manic episodes. So for what is given in the question, it's only depression. Okay. So this was also pretty straightforward, but in this one, people may get confused because bipolar is also there, but it's not so confusing also. Right. So next one. Okay. Exocrine glands are called, other than hormones. Okay, what is the question? But I think the question is framed a bit maybe ungrammatical. I think exocrine glands are called other than hormones. All right, I think there may be a dash in between somewhere because of copy pasting. It could have gone. So they're basically asking exocrine glands are dash. Fine. Anyway, exocrine glands are associated with what? Are they duct glands? Are they ductless glands? Primary? None of the above. Okay. I think the question has gotten copy pasted here. Exocrine glands are which chemical substances other than hormones? That may be the question. So what is the answer here? Is exocrine glands a ductless gland, duct gland, primary? Yeah. Someone said B, but what about others? I'll tell you it is not ductless gland. So B is not the correct answer. That would be for endocrine glands. Endocrine glands are ductless glands which secrete hormones. So exocrine glands are glands which secrete chemical substances other than hormones. So what are they? Nobody has options. They do kind of secrete enzymes also. So it'll be A. Okay, so they do have ducts. Ducts are basically tubes through which it targets specific areas. So hormones actually are directly secreted into the bloodstream. They target wide range of areas. For example, cortisol, adrenaline. So they are directly released to the bloodstream and they could do various parts of the body, right? Exocrine glands target particular parts. So they acquire the tubules and they secrete it there. Okay, so they are duct glands. So how many of you did not know this answer? Just a raise of hands. Found this question a bit difficult. Just 1%, 2. It's okay. All right. So I think it's because of core biopsychology question or more biology question, not much of psychology in this. That's okay. So here there's a picture that's loading. Just wait for it. All right. So this is a tricky one. Even I couldn't understand initially, but because of answers that are so easy in the math following, I was able to do it. So I actually had to go back and read up also. So even I'm learning with you guys. So we have 4 options for match the following and 4 questions. Okay. So what I'll do is instead of asking, I'll just like tell you what is what. So Skinner is what? What did he give? So what was Skinner's contribution to psychology? Because that is so easy, people would know easily. Skinner is from which school of psychology? Behaviorism, right? So particularly radical behaviorism, because he said everything is behavior. So he talked about stimulus response. There was no O in between, right? So that is Skinner's radical behaviorism. So Maslow, you would of course know, it's self-actualization. So with these two, you can figure out most of the things, where D is 2 and B is 1. So Dollard and Miller and Maslow, so I knew both of them had kind of things related to social learning. Dollard and Miller also gave the frustration aggression hypothesis. So Maslow, we know he gave the social learning theory modeling. So, but it happens to be that Dollard and Miller gave social learning theory before Maslow, and Maslow kind of built on it. So Maslow would be later social learning, Dollard and Miller would be early. Okay, so A3, B1, C4, and Maslow 3. Wait, 2. Sorry, Maslow's 2. Okay, so that would be the correct answer. Right. So in this, if you do not know anything, so or like half of the things, so just don't lose hope, don't get frustrated. Okay, so you can still get things correct if you know a few things. For example, you knew Skinner is radical behaviorism. Just search for B1. Okay, even if there are 2 options, then is there something else you know for sure? Maslow is D2. Okay, so D2, we have only one option. So by process of elimination, you can get it correct, even though there's going to be negative marking, about which I'll talk at the end. So even Walters, I didn't know. So he was one of the co-authors for the social learning and the experiment they had conducted. So we all know Bandura, we may not know the co-authors that were there. Okay. So Bandura did conduct several series of experiments. So Walters would have been one of the co-authors. That's what I'm assuming. If I'll get back to you on this, I'll note this down. Okay. Right. We'll move on to the next one. So which of the following personality types is described as noisy, callous, fond of physical activity? So this relates to Sheldon's personality types based on body morphism. Can go ahead and take guesses. Yeah, it's C. So endomorphs being like overweight people. So Sheldon said they are very friendly, happy, go lucky people. Ectomorph being very shy and reserved. Mesomorph being very active and assertive. So not sure about callous because that means kind of unempathetic. But anyway, so fond of physical activity, noisy mostly, is characteristic of mesomorphs. Okay, so this is based on Sheldon's classification of personality based on body types. Okay. So who among the following had defined perception as a complex of sensory and imaginal events? So this was a bit difficult for me when I had to go, but I knew it was one of the authors related to structuralism, but I was not confident about who the other people were. Okay. So right now people have reacted, it's B. Anyone else wants to react? Any other options? B is what I'm seeing mostly. Right. So it is Titchener, who is a structuralist. So structuralism has to do with sensory and components of consciousness, right? So, but I didn't know the others. When I put this in ChatGPT and asked for an answer, ChatGPT was so confident that it was Schaffer, because Schaffer had actually given a definition which defines it as a complex of sensory and imaginal events. But the answer key given by Ihbas goes by Titchener. Okay, but turns out that there was a person named Roy Schaffner who gave this as a word-to-word definition. So I'm not sure if it was a mistake. They didn't like screen out the options properly, but the option given by Ihbas, and if you had given Titchener, that would be the right answer. But know that Roy Schaffer also had given a similar definition. Okay. All right, so we move on. Oh wait, I didn't mark the right answer correctly. So Yeah, so it's actually Krishna according to Ihbas paper, and even as far as I have read, I have not heard of Schaffer. Okay, fine. So who gave the economic deprivation? Not gave. Who demonstrated that economic deprivation affects perception? This is also a difficult question for me because I have not read too much into the history parts of it. So if you can take a guess, even I had to take a guess in this question. Yes, Jugal, you have a doubt? Go ahead. People are reacting. B.
That's okay.
Yeah, go on. You have a question to ask?
Yeah. I hope you can hear me. So,
Yeah.
there is, there is this book by Aruna Bruta, Experimental
Hmm.
Research Design. And in that book,
Hmm.
they briefly talk about one of the studies Bruta and Ganguly had done on Hindu and Muslim children, uh, on their perception of punishment, something like that, in relation to
Hmm.
monetary rewards. So just wanted to point that out. You might want to look into that because I'm not sure. So I thought I might just bring that to
Yeah.
your notice.
So I think even though it talks about religion, even though it talks about monetary rewards, so economic deprivation may be a broader event like depression, right? Like as an economic depression. So during those times, it affects everyone, right? So that could be the one what we're talking about here. So the answer key is that it's Brunner and Goodman. Okay. But even I have not heard of this or read about it. Okay. So the answer key says it's Brunner and Goodman. Okay. So I'll have to again, like of course, along with you, keep myself updated as well. Okay. So it was Brunner and Goodman. So only 1% reacted. It's okay if you did not know this. You cannot get every question right. So it is likely to happen. So yeah, next question is functionalism. Another very straightforward question, very easy one. So an early school of thought in psychology, functionalism, was mostly associated with who or which psychologist? Yeah, it's C, William James, right? So John Watson was behaviorism. Edward Tishner, we know it's structuralism. Oh, Stanley Hall, I'm not completely sure. So we'll go with William James, right? So next one is Leon Festinger. I would say, give you a hint, he's a social psychologist. So you can answer this question. Yeah. Sorry, what? B. Okay. I thought I saw C. So he gave cognitive dissonance. So he also gave something related to life theory. So which was his view of, seeing or life space for social events interacting with your perceptions and all that. So he did give cognitive dissonance. If you remember this experiment where one person was given $0 and asked to say it was, very interesting for an experiment, and another person was given $10. So the person who was given $10 was having a lot of cognitive dissonance. So he was less likely to say it, or he was less likely to stick to his own views because there's attack on change. I think that was the experiment. So anyway, so it's cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is most likely when the attitudes and behaviors do not match. So that is the dissonance part. Okay, so that experiments or set of experiments, one of is attributed to Leon Festinger. So savoring is a concept in positive psychology. It involves, it's pretty straightforward. If you know the meaning of savoring, you can answer this. Yeah, it's B. So enhancing the enjoyment of positive experiences. But it is definitely not avoiding negative experiences. So that would be experiential avoidance. So that is not what positive psychology is about. Okay, it's not stress reduction. It is not reflecting on past traumas. That is not related to positive psychology at all. Okay. So hope you guys are also keeping note of how many answers you're getting right, so that we'll know where you do stand at the end of the MCQ. Social identity theory says that individuals derive part of their identity from A, B, C, or D. Yeah. So it is the group membership, which group they belong to, and the social categories within that group. There may be hierarchies like economic status, or there may be caste systems that are prevalent in our society. So that is what determines your identity. So rather than only your economic status, so it is group membership. Economic status can also be overall group, but people are not so aware of that, like demographic classifications, right? So someone from Chennai, someone from another city. So that is a identity they derive from, or even religion, you could say, language. So those are groups from which they derive their identity. Definitely not personal achievement, not personal preferences, because you're talking about social identity theory. So we'd not be using that. Halo effect. What is halo effect? Any reactions? Judging people based on group memberships, positive trait, negative. Someone said D. Anyone else? No one else saying it's something other than D. Or you can use the chat also to answer. It's not D actually. Halo effect is way more specific. The opposite of halo effect is also called horn effect. So halo effect basically is that a positive trait influences perception of everything else. Suppose, so it's kind of like the first impression is the best impression, right? So if the first impression is good and people take it at face value and say, oh, you're a good person. So that's halo effect. The opposite is the first impression is bad, and impression is completely bad. So it is definitely not based on group membership. It's not negative behaviors, because that the horn effect, kind of the initial impression, but it is more specific. So B would be the right answer. Okay. So this is how the questions can get confusing with the options. All right. Yeah, it is B. So stages of cognitive development, it's pretty much easy. Sigmund Freud gave psychosexual stages of development. Who gave psychosocial stages of development? Jean Piaget is the right answer. Erik Erikson gave psychosocial stages of development. Jean Piaget for cognitive. Kohlberg for what? Kohlberg gave moral development. Yeah, good. So it is neither of those apart from B, right? So it's pretty simple again. So which personality assessment uses ink blots to assess thought process? It's again a pretty straightforward one, an easy one. Ink blots. Which test uses ink blots? Yeah, Jean Piaget did give moral development. It's a part of his cognitive development too. Yes. So it's Rorschach, but in the answer key, they had given it as TAT, which is completely wrong. So it is actually Rorschach test, because Rorschach uses ink blot. TAT uses pictures. There is this Murray version, and we have this Indianized version of Uma Chowdhury. Okay. There's also a child version, which includes animals. So anyway, that is about TAT. Little bit of Rorschach. So we have 10 pictures, right, or 10 ink blots based on which people respond, and based on their perception and their response, we understand where they have psychopathology. We can also understand their personality. Okay. So Rorschach is also a diagnostic test, not just a personality test. So which disorder is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder? So neurodevelopmental is anything that starts from birth, developmental, and is related to neural connectivity or structures. So it's be ADHD. So can you name any other neurodevelopmental disorder apart from ADHD? Just so that we kind of brush up on concepts as well. Any other neurodevelopmental disorder apart from ADHD? You can use the chat also. Autism is one good. Anything else? Cerebral palsy. Rett syndrome is a part of ASD in DSM-5. If you go by or ICD-10, Rett syndrome is separate. Intellectual disability. Yeah, correct. So what does the term neuroplasticity refer to? Yeah. So plasticity meaning change, neuro meaning the brain or the nervous system. So what would be the answer? First one, right? So it's again pretty straightforward. I think we'll just keep going, but you'll have to react faster. So who is known for their work on observational learning and the Bobodor experiment? This though we already know. We just discussed this. So it's Bandura, right? So Sigmund Freud, it's psychodynamic and about unconsciousness. Skinner is about behaviorism, radical behaviorism. Carl Rogers is about client-centered therapy. Okay. So Carl Rogers is also about kind of self-actualization, but pretty much it's Maslow. Anyway, so for observational learning, it's Albert Bandura. Graphical representation of correlation data. I think this, some people may get it wrong. We'll see. Graphical representation of correlation data is called what? Okay. Okay, pretty much people have got it correct. Okay, so this one is really bad. So it is scatter plot because you have an axis for variable 1 and variable 2. Basically, when you're having bivariate correlation, so you plot a dot. Okay, you plot a lot of dots, and then you draw a line which describes all the dots or summarizes it better. So that's also the concept of regression. So bell curve is something which indicates normality of the data. Okay, so your correlation will have to be normal when it is univariate. Okay, so when you have only one variable, okay, so the number of people and the scores on a test A. Okay, so that would give you bell curve. When you have two sets of data, so you would use scatter plot. Chi-square is for categorical data, so it analyzes whether there's a difference in frequencies in one category or not. It can also give you correlation. The correlation would be, what is it? I'm not getting it. Kramer's V is when you have several, what do you call it? Columns and rows. But when you have only 2 into 2, it is called not tetrachoric, phi coefficient. Okay, so that is chi-square. And skew distribution is when the normal curve is very skewed on either one in left or the right side. So the answer is scatter plot. Okay. So going forward, right. So this is also pretty easy from social psychology. So item testing again are going to be very limited. So depends on the entrance also. So if you're going for Ihbas or like from NIMHANS, it's going to be very limited. So you're going to get a lot of questions from development psychology, from social psychology, and even little from biopsychology, but kind of a lot from psychopathology as also. Okay. So here people said it is social loafing, right? B. So when people are not investing as much effort surrounding others, it's social loafing. Okay, so can you guys tell me like what are some ways to reduce social loafing? So that can also be a possible question. So what are some ways in which you can reduce social loafing? Accountability is one. Good. Appreciating their individual efforts. So there's one more thing which is not in the books, but they have given it as an example: visibility. Yeah. So individual efforts basically is that. So if you have the cubicles height lowered, people, it kind of adds on to accountability. It makes them more visible, hence more accountable. Okay. So it also kind of is related to the behaviors in online where disinhibition happens, where because people are not visible. That is also one factor, but it's just worded differently. So yeah, social facilitation is where in a group, when you have a common goal, and okay, not common goal. So basically individual goal. Social loafing is about common goal. When you have a common goal and in your group, you put in less effort. Social facilitation is you may not have a common goal. It could be an individual goal, and a well-learned task or a well-practiced task is boosted because of the presence of others. Okay. So de-individuation is kind of related to the disinhibition, where people act differently than their usual selves. Sleep effect, I'm not exactly sure about the sleep effect. Anyway, so we'll maybe like look at that and cover that at the end. Okay, social loafing. So we'll go on further. Which of the following hormone is secreted by the adrenal gland? A, B, C, which is A and B together, or D? So clap is for C, right? Yeah. So adrenal gland secretes a lot of things. Cortisol is one. Epinephrine is also one. So norepinephrine is also another. Basically, they are adrenaline and noradrenaline. So A and B are the answers. So melatonin is not secreted by, it's actually secreted in the brain. So A and B are secreted by the adrenal gland. So melatonin is a hormone which is secreted in reaction to your like light fluctuations, day and night fluctuations. So it is helpful in sleep also. Okay, so there's supposed to be a dash before. So dash ensures assignment of subject of a population to treatment groups in such a way that for any given assignment to the treatment group, every member of the population has equal probability of being chosen. So what is this? People may get it wrong, but we'll see. So people who have said it's B, it is correct, because we are talking about randomization, which allots already selected sample to different treatment groups, control versus experimental group. But random sampling is where you choose your population, your sample from a set of population. Here they have given the word population, which can be confusing to a lot of people. So the allotment is to treatment groups. That is done by randomization. So from population to your study sample, that would be random sampling, which is not what is told here. Okay. So randomness is just a principle like entropy. So it has nothing to do with this. Stratification is where you have several strata. So it may be related to sampling, stratified sampling. So where you have, let's say, lower economic status, higher economic status, and you sample in each strata. Okay, so that has nothing to do with sampling. So the question has actually nothing to do with sampling. Okay, so it is about random allotment, so which is also called randomization. Any of you got it wrong? You can raise your hand to say, I actually thought different. Okay, that's fine. All right, so which of the following experiments is about the power of roles? Roles being, let's say a person was a teacher, a person was a student, and how does that change? Okay, I'll give you a more straightforward clue. Prisoners versus inmates, right? So they switched the roles and found how the experiment was, and because of, yeah, it's D. Okay, the prison word is there already. So because of the intensity of the role being influenced by the power, so they had to even stop the experiment. Okay, So Robert's cave experiment is about identity, in-group versus out-group. Milgram's experiment is about obedience. So Zilstein's shock research, it's not in predominant social psychology. It's about anonymity, not exactly anonymity. So when you're having a shock, right? So would you prefer to be alone versus would you prefer to have someone? Even though the someone is anonymous and you're not seeing them, just the presence of someone kind of makes a shock tolerable is what they kind of found. So Zimbardo's experiment is what we are dealing with here, power of roles. Okay. So in social psychology, reactance is dash. Reactance is what? Yeah, it's B. So reactance is basically when someone gives you a forced choice and says you have to do this. So you kind of feel your freedom is taken away and hence you react by doing option C. So which restores your freedom. So suppose they say do this or that, A or B, right? And you are fond of neither, but you feel like your freedom is taken away in both the choices. You actually may have various options. So you kind of fight for that. So that is reactance. So the motivation to restore your freedom of choice. They have not mentioned of choice, but that is what it means here. So not the freedom like, the fight for freedom. That's not what it means here. So it's not tendency to comply with direct requests. That would be what? Tendency to comply with direct requests is called what? Any idea what that is called? It's called compliance. Okay. So persuasive messages on attitude change, that is persuasion. Tendency to follow social norms without question. What is the fourth one called? So that like even if the questions are asked in a different way, you guys can answer. Yeah, it is conformity. Okay, and particularly it's normative influence within conformity. Okay, we'll come to that. There's another question about it. So answer to social psychology is reactance is the motivation to restore freedom of choice. Okay. So in the nurture versus nature debate, which early philosopher argued that mind is tabula rasa or a blank slate at birth? This one's from history, even though I knew it before. I was not completely sure of others. So this is a tough one if you have not read the history part of it. Okay, so the answer is John Locke. So he talked about tabula rasa. So a blank slate, saying a person is born as a blank slate and then develops things later. Okay. So Rene Descartes also talked about one thing. So he said this is dash is a point where mind and body meets. What is that point? It's in the brain. I'm asking another question. Conorium. I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, pineal gland. He said. Conorium. I've not heard of it. You meant to say corpus callosum or something like that. But in his time, they may have not have known corpus callosum and things. So he said pineal gland is the only gland which is not symmetric or paired. So that should be the place where the mind and body meet. So he was a dualist. Immanuel Kant, I read about him. I clearly cannot remember right now. So this again tells you if you do not recall, you're going to forget all that you read. Okay. So anyway, John Locke is the right answer. So which brain structure is primarily involved in regulating emotions such as fear and aggression? It's an easy one. Oh, conorium is what he called as. Okay, I didn't know that. Thanks for that information. So caveat for you guys, conorium is what he called as in, what's the name again? Oh my God. Rene Descartes. So he called conorium as pineal gland or pineal gland as conorium. Okay. So if the answer is changed to conorium, you guys should also remember that. So here it is amygdala. Hippocampus is kind of involved in processing emotional memories. It kind of is next to the amygdala. It's part of the limbic system too. So, but it is not hippocampus that regulates emotions. It processes emotional memory. So hypothalamus is kind of just below thalamus, need not be about, you know, emotions. So it is to do with basic functions. So it is to do with, regulating the pituitary gland. Cerebellum is about balance. It is about some automatic functions, motor learning. It's also to correct responses, reflexes. So, for example, an object is moving. You had already tried to reach out to the object. Cerebellum is involved in making last-minute corrections also. Okay. So the answer here is amygdala. So it's about regulating emotions such as fear and aggression. So thankfully, it is very straightforward. They didn't ask which part of amygdala is for which. Then it would have been very tricky. In research, what is a confounding variable? Confounding variable can also be called as extraneous variables. So what is the answer here? A, B. Yeah, it is B. It influences both independent and dependent variables. It is not that which only affects the dependent variables, right? So that would actually be independent. If you know that that variable is only about dependent, so there is no confounding, there is no unknown factor. Okay, just 1 second. Just let me pause this. Okay, guys, you're back. Was there any background noise that was going on? Could you guys hear maybe crackers or something? No, right?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. All right, so we are back with the forms. In psychodynamic framework, what is the concept that says, or what is the defense mechanism where an individual attributes their unacceptable thoughts and feelings to someone else so that they avoid direct confrontation or owning those feelings? It's pretty much easy. Yeah, it is projection. Rationalization is where they make explanations for what they did was correct. For example, the typical example people give is someone ate a cake and said that it was going bad, so I ate it. Okay, it's a rationalization. Projection is where, let's say you started a fight, but you don't want the guilt. So you said that person started a fight to avoid that guilt or to avoid that blame. So that is projection. So displacement is, a lot of people may be confused between these. Displacement is where it is between two external things. So you are angry at your boss, so you come home and kick your dog. So that is a typical example. So there are two different things. So it is unacceptable to do that with one place, so you do it in another place or situation. Sublimation is socially acceptable ways of acknowledging or satisfying that need. For example, a person's sexual needs, if the person is an artist, they do so by drawing, or the person has anger and they take it out via sports. So it's socially acceptable ways. So the answer here is projection, when someone attributes unacceptable thoughts of oneself to someone else. This is also the phenomenon for what test? This is also the underlying phenomenon for some tests. Can you give examples of those tests? Personality tests. There are two that comes to my mind. Yeah, Rorschach-Inkblot test is one. TAT is also one. Okay. So there's also one thing which is semi-projective. It's called sentence completion test. There are various versions of it. Sachs version is also there. So it's kind of semi-projective, okay, because they give you an incomplete sentence which is completely filled. So it's kind of semi-projective. The projection is very minimal there. Anyway, moving on. So what is the main distinction between psychologist and a psychiatrist? Oh my God, did they even ask this? So what is the difference? Psychiatrist can prescribe medication, while a psychologist typically cannot. Okay, both are related to mental health. It is not that they treat children and psychologists treat adults. It is kind of the same, but the difference is that they can prescribe medication, we cannot. Which psychologists propose the concept of zone of proximal development? Okay, this can be tricky for some people. So what is the answer here? Yeah. So I'll tell you who said what. So Jean Piaget gave the cognitive development theory, right? So it is about what are the various stages. So formal, wait, we'll start from the start. Sensory, what is the other one? Sensory motor stage, and then pre-operational, post-operational, operational and post-operational. So we have various stages of cognitive development. So Erik Erikson talked about psychosocial development. We have the 8 stages there. Lev Vygotsky talked about zones of proximal development within a theory where people, the elders teach others, and they do so by slowly instructing, modeling, and pushing them from the comfort zone to the zone where they can do it with extra effort. It is not completely out of reach. So that zone where you have a little bit of effort and you're able to do it with guidance is called zone of proximal development. Freud did not talk about that. So Freud talked about psychosexual stages, ego, superego consciousness, and all that. All right. So which psychological process is this group effect mostly closely associated with? The options are a bit confusing here, so I'll leave you to it. So we'll see what is mostly related to it. So one answer is B. Anyone else wanting to take a guess? Stroop. So you basically read colors, name colors, okay, and then you read. Sorry. First, you're supposed to read the letters, the names of colors, name whatever is written. You read the words first, okay, and then second, what you read is the name of the colors. You're not supposed to read the word, right? So it's typically associated with response inhibition. So that is the exact word here, but the closest thing here is attention. You may think it's language development. Language development is required to administer Stroop test, but that is not what is being measured here. It is attention, or selectively paying attention to two things while inhibiting another. So in the NIMHANS battery, the exact term that we use for Stroop test or the ability it measures is response inhibition. Okay. So anyway, attention would be the most closely associated psychological process in this case. All right. So which phenomenon describes improved performance on tasks in the presence of others? So this is the opposite of social loafing. So we know it is not social loafing. It is not group polarization where the group splits into the opinions in terms of polar opposites. It's not diffusion of responsibility where people don't help when they are in larger numbers. So that is called bystander effect. And it happens because of diffusion of responsibility. So it is not that. It is social facilitation where a well-practiced task or something that you have good ability or mastery in, so that performance is increased, particularly if it's something individualistic for yourself, a goal, individualistic goal. Right. Which of the following is a symptom of GAD? So it is B. In other words, this can also be replaced by free-floating anxiety. Okay, so that is a terminology that is used for GAD. So if they say free-floating anxiety, as in anxiety that is not attached to particular source, that can also be a characteristic of GAD. Okay, so it is persistent excessive worry. Another characteristic is that it is attached, sorry, not attached. So free-floating. Okay, so you do not have mania here. You do not have hallucinations here. These can be comorbidities, but not so. Mood swings can also happen because they're feeling so anxious, right? But ideally, it is persistent excessive worry. The other key characteristic is that it is free floating anxiety. Either can be asked. Okay. Right. Delusional beliefs of an individual. Okay. This can be confusing for some people. Let's see. I would want most people to answer this. Delusional beliefs of an individual that one is being deliberately interfered with, discriminated against, plotted against, threatened, or otherwise mistreated is called delusion of dash. Okay, someone said B. Anyone else? Any other answers? I knew this was a tough one. It is reference. See, I know there are some hints that tell it is persecution, that one is being threatened, right? But it says one is deliberately interfered with. Someone is deliberating trying to attack you only or target you only. It's not only attack, it's also someone is deliberately discriminated against. Okay. So in delusion of persecution, these features are also similar, but they do not feel that everyone is targeting them, or they feel like the police is out to get them. There may be some source out there. Okay. They feel like they are being plotted against. Yeah, true. In persecution, it will be more of an attack on themselves. It may not be like, okay, people are talking against me, spreading rumors against me. That wouldn't be not persecution. That would be reference. So delusion of control is where someone says an external agency is controlling their sensations, their motivations or urges, or their even body movements. Okay. So grandiosity is a delusion where someone says they are capable of things that they're usually not capable of. Like they may say they're God, they're God's child, and they can like stop electricity or something, they can create electricity, just those kinds of delusions. So this one is reference. Okay. If it was only threatened against, plotted against, then yeah, it could be persecution. But other things like they're just interfered with, it's not to do with any attack, physical harm or anything. So physical harm, persecution, just tampered with, people are discussing him, people are noticing him. So that would mean it's a reference. Okay. Hope that clarifies it. Okay. So yeah. A set of score that does not result in unique set of group scores. So this is a very poorly framed question, I would say. So any score that is not a group score, that would not be included in a group score. Pooled, whatever, that means it's grouped. So it's not. Frequency can be present for class intervals. So it is not. Percentage can also be given for that. It's basically raw data. The opposite of group data is raw data. So they have asked it in a very poorly framed way. Okay. So sometimes the questions itself can be very misleading because they have framed poorly. So dash are particularly helpful when comparing frequency distribution in which the number of cases differ. So here also the options can be a bit misleading. So we'll see how many of you get it right. So when the number of cases differ in, let's say, 3 groups, one group has 10, other group has 8, another has 9. So which one would you use? Okay. So it's relative frequencies, that's the technical term. Frequency proportion is kind of also an acceptable use term, but not so formal. So people may choose this also because it sounds similar, but the right answer is relative frequencies. Okay. So frequencies percentage is not used. That would also be kind of a proportion, but the exact term is relative frequencies. Okay. Cumulative frequencies though something else. It means you keep adding a frequency for each class interval. That does not make sense here at all. Right. Yeah, it is relative frequencies. Okay, chief characteristic of hypnosis is what? I think it's better if you can use a chat because I'm missing out on the reactions. Okay, you guys can use a chat. Just A, B, C, D and things. So it is increased suggestibility. So even though you may think it unlocks a lot of creativity because it's part of unconsciousness, they may be just secondary effects of hypnosis. So first is that a person is more suggestible in hypnotic state, may not be heightened arousal, because hypnotic state usually is because of relaxation, and hence they're more suggestible. Okay. Increased self-esteem, not necessarily related to hypnosis, but can be a part of it. So not directly related. All right. So what we'll do is we'll rush through this quickly because we may be lacking time. Okay. So which factor is organizational stressor leading to job-related stress? Organizational stressor is the keyword. Family is not organizational. Political uncertainty is not organizational. It's task and role demands. Number of people you have in your family is not organizational related. So question is pretty easy. Task and role demands. All right. You keep marking. So we'll see how much you guys got. So what is normative social influence? Okay. So this is to do with conformity. There are two types of conformity or social influence: normative versus informative. So you want to be correct, so you follow the majority. So that is informative. If you just want to be accepted and have people around, so that is normative. So the desire to be accepted and liked by others, that is normative. The first one, to be correct and accurate, is informative. Influence based on personal beliefs and values. That's not a particular term or anything. Influence based on power, perceived power and authority is because of obedience. Okay. So this is to be liked by others. Next one, who is regarded as the pioneer of psychology in India for establishing first laboratory, it's Girindra Shekhar Bose. I cannot give you why he did so, because S.K. Mangal just wrote a book on statistics. A.K. Singh. I mean, I think A.K. Singh is what they had meant. G.S. Rati, I'm not sure, but Girindra Shekhar Bose is the one who established the first laboratory in India. Okay. So which brain structure is involved in forming new memories? Hippocampus, right? Amygdala can give the emotions, but it is hippocampus that adds emotions, and the memory, semantic or even episodic, stores it, processes it basically. So it is involved in consolidation of memory. Okay. Cerebellum may be related to learning of motoric responses, but it's not generally memory. So thalamus is the relay center, kind of involved in the memory consolidation process, but hippocampus is the main area. Okay. So what is the term for brain's process of regulating its own responses to stress by controlling hormonal release? Okay. So this one, you guys put it in the chat box. It's allostasis. Allostasis is basically where you change your behavior to accommodate a particular regulatory level or baseline. So that happens through hormonal release and other things. Homeostasis is where the body automatically changes it for mechanical things, not by changing your behavior internally. So allostasis happens behaviorally, and that change happens because of hormones. You know that hormones do affect your behavior, right? So that would be allostasis. Circadian rhythm is not generic for changing your own thing. It can be one of the ways, one of the cycles. Neuroplasticity is not related to it, so it's allostasis. So which model proposes that memory is organized in a network of interconnected nodes? Okay, so there may be two answers here. The correct answer apparently is connectionist model. So network model is also another model which is in cognitive psychology. They actually should not have given this as an option. So connectionist model is the answer keys option, but technically network model is also one. Okay. So, but the more commonly used term is connectionist. So the options are not, well made. So any of you said C? Yeah. Okay, which disorder involves alternating periods of mania and depression? Easy, bipolar. Bipolar has two poles. One is manic episode, one is depressive episode. Okay. There can be various types of bipolar. If they ask hypomania, so that is also bipolar. But the difference is hypomania is bipolar 2, mania and depression is bipolar 1. Okay. Schizophrenia, if schizophrenia and depression episode or manic episode happens, what is it called? That's another question I'm asking. This is a question that I'm asking. Schizophrenia criteria is met. The person also simultaneously meets criteria for mania or depression. So what would that? Yeah, it is called schizoaffective that way. Okay. The biopsychosocial model integrates which of the following factors in understanding mental health? I mean, they just elaborated this biological, social, psychological and social. So it'll be really bad if you got this wrong. So anyway, moving on. What is the critical feature of Carl Rogers' client-centered therapy? It's not unconscious. It is unconditional positive regard, because he talks about 4 key elements of this therapy, right? Genuineness, congruence, which is kind of the same, empathy, unconditional positive regard was the fourth number. It is B. Wait. Genuineness and congruence is kind of the same. Unconditional positive regard, empathy, warmth. I think only 3 that I can remember. See, this is again an example of if you do not, recall things, so you may forget things. But anyway, for this purpose, it is therapist providing unconditional positive regard. He did not implement any strict behavioral modifications or any aversive stimulus. So those are not answers. So according to Freud, which term refers to part of the personality mediating desires, which is basically id, and social rules, which would be superego. So it would not be the first 2. It's ego. Freud called it ego. Okay. So self, people, a lot of other psychoanalysts used ego as synonymous for self, right? So it's not what Freud said. So it is ego. So what is the concept of neural pruning? Pruning basically means reducing. So as you grow, the amount of unnecessary neural connections come down. Only those connections which are repeatedly used, they stay. It's elimination of unused neural connections. It's not strengthening of neural pathways, which can be a precursor to pruning, but it is not what pruning exactly is. Tendency of people to attribute own behavior to external causes and others' behavior to internal causes is okay. It's a social psychology concept. We'll eliminate options here and say self-serving bias. Okay, so it is not what it is. Self-serving bias basically means you attribute positive outcomes to your own self and negative outcomes to external luck or something, a difficulty or something like that. Okay, so that is to do with your own self. So it is not something else. So it's not what it is being said. Fundamental attribution error is where you attribute. Okay, there's a major difference between actor observer and this. So the answer here is actor observer, as far as I can remember. So where actor observer is, you attribute external causes to others because you're not able to understand their own internal things that is going on in their mind or their own behavior, right? So that is you as an observer give external cues to the observer, whoever is doing something. But when you're the actor, you give internal causes. So fundamental attribution error is similar, but it is to do with your own self again. So you attribute internal causes to your own self when it is like good. So that'd be self-serving bias, right? Right. So fundamental attribution error causes. I think I'll get back to this. So stereotyping is basically you using a group's identity for everyone equally. So the answer here is actor-observer effect. So there's a major difference between fundamental attribution error and actor-observer. I'm not able to recall at the moment. C involves oneself and others. No, it is not fundamental attribution error. So it's different, but I'm just not able to find the keyword to say this. Oh my God. Okay. So fundamental attribution error, I'll get back to it, but right now the answer is actor-observer effect. Okay. According to law of items, okay, this is Gestalt. So items that are closer together are seen as a group. So this is based on proximity. Continuity is where there will be lines. You see lines that are making a continuous flow. So that would be the principle of continuity. Similarity, you know, those are in similar shape, size, color. They are grouped together. Closure as in, even if they are incomplete, you close it. This closure is not related to proximity. So the question is related to proximity. Okay. Data presented in a series of rectangles, each of it represents scores. Okay, basically bar graph or histogram based on one of the class intervals tabulated distribution. So bar graph is used for categorical data. Okay, like gender, so many frequency, male, so many, female, so many. When it is about class interval, like this year to this year, so many people failed or something. So that would be histogram. Okay, bar graph is usually for categorical data. That would be the main key for answering this. Tendency of rater, reviewer to judge an individual on the basis of a single attribute. Okay, so here they have similarity error based on others. They find similarity and they therefore you are also the same. That is similarity error. Central tendency, the average is what people think is everyone is like. That is not what is described here. Contrast is the opposite of similarity error. Halo error, even though it is particularly about positive, it is a tendency to attribute based on one single attribute, which is a positive attribute. So halo error is what is closely associated with what is given here, even though it's not the exact definition here. Okay. So Jean Charcot, Freud kind of did study under him, demonstrated that hysterical phenomena such as loss of feeling in limbs or fainting, basically dissociation, could be produced by hypnosis, suggestion. Okay. The questions have been options have been jumbled. He said it's hypnosis and suggestion. So answer is both A and B. But because the questions are jumbled or the options are jumbled, it is for this particular question, it's A and C. Okay. Barbara Fredrickson is known for her work on broaden and build theory, where they say positive emotions have a varied way of responses. So the more positive emotions you have, the more ways you respond, and you keep building on your positive emotions. It's kind of like debunked. So, but anyway, Barbara Fredrickson did give this. Cognitive distortions, we know it's Leon Festinger who conducted those experiments, and we talked about it. Flow theory is Csikszentmihalyi, if you have heard of him. Psychodynamic theory, we know a lot of people like Freud and so many associates. So it's broaden and build. Bystander effect suggests that people are less likely to help when they are in a group. So they said more likely to help when they're alone than in a group. So that would be bystander effect. It happens because of distribution of responsibility. They say, okay, someone else will do it. No. So another similar related concept is pluralistic ignorance. What is that? How is it different from bystander effect? That is option 4. Okay. So bystanders being less likely to notice emergencies in a group is pluralistic ignorance, because they think, oh, these things will not happen in public, right? So someone is kind of attacking another, they are more likely to think, oh, they are just having fun. They may be just, friends and doing this. So that is the attribution that they may give, or they may not even notice it. So that would be pluralistic ignorance. Okay. Rotter's concept of locus of control. Locus of control is basically internal and external, attributing whether the outcome is because of your own doing or some external factor like luck or something else. So it is not cognitive schemas, genetic predisposition, or social status. It's straightforward answer. So which neurotransmitters involved in muscle contraction and also to learning and memory? So you can answer this. Dopamine. No, it's not dopamine. Yeah, acetylcholine. So whatever reason you said dopamine is kind of like consider the reward and also for pleasurable activities. Serotonin adjusts your mood, your sleep. Kind of like pleasure also, but it's more to do with long lasting things. That's why people or psychiatrists, they prescribe serotonin when they treat people with depression. Acetylcholine is present in your neuromuscular junctions. That is what leads to contraction. It is also in learning and memory. Okay. So glutamate is the major excitatory neurotransmitter. So it is not exactly related to learning and memory. ACT. Oh, acetylcholine. Okay. Acetylcholine may be related to Alzheimer's, but GABA is inhibitory. Glutamate is excitatory. Wait, now I am confused. Let me just pull this up. GABA is inhibitory. Guys, you just made me confused. Okay. GABA is inhibitory. That is what I said. I hope, right? Glutamate is excitatory. Glutamate, because it's just two things, 50-50 chance you may get confused. Now, because of this, you confusing me. Glutamate is excitatory. Okay. So you can say that glutamate is what is present in the retina. Okay. So when there is lack of light, oh wait, is it GABA? Now, anyway, glutamate is inhibitory, sorry, excitatory. This is confusion going beyond. Glutamate is excitatory, GABA is inhibitory. Okay. Yeah. GABA is also related to anxiety disorders and sometimes also related in OCD. But predominant literature says it's serotonin, which is also related in OCD. So yeah, GABA is about inhibitory functions. Anyway, where were we? Research design best suited for cause and effect is not correlation because you only know direction. I mean, you don't know direction, you just know association as in the strength of relationship. Cross-sectional does not tell you anything about causation. Okay. Experimental design is where you manipulate something. So there is a temporal change. So you can attribute cause and effect relationship. Case study is just one study. Even if you do an experimental design in case study, it is not enough to generalize. So best suited for cause and effect is experimental. Which branch of psychology is concerned with optimizing human behavior in workplace? Oh my God. Industrial organization psychology, nothing else is related to that. Just move on. A person is more likely to experience cognitive dissonance when attitude and behavior are different. Thoughts align with their behavior? No. Cognitive dissonance is least. They're forced to make a decision that goes against their belief. Okay. So here, action and belief. Belief being your attitude and your behavior being the decision. So this is where cognitive dissonance is very likely. Okay. Which neuropsychological disorder characterized by severe memory impairment and confusion caused by chronic alcohol abuse? These forced dissonance for the previous one. Yeah. So alcohol abuse leading to memory impairment and confusion. Good. Korsakoff's. Okay. So it's Korsakoff's syndrome. It is caused because alcohol use causes a lot of vitamin deficiencies, particularly thiamine. Okay. So which leads to memory impairment. Right. Erickson's theory, again, which conflict is characterized in the late adulthood? The last stage, it is about ego integrity versus despair. Even though ego is not given, integrity versus despair. Okay. If you just know Erickson's, I think you can get around 2 or 3 questions correct. Just read it like thoroughly and go for the exam. So what is the main difference between classical and operant conditioning? Classical is about association, pairing. Operant is about reinforcement of punishment. So straightforward. GAD is a pervasive condition which the sufferer experiences continued apprehension about unspecific things. I told you earlier, it's the free floating anxiety. So fear of fear is for panic disorder. People fear that they may fear so much and have a heart attack, and they fear, the fear compounds. So panic disorder, that is the characteristic of that. Continual flashbacks of past events is basically PTSD, where the traumatic event is kind of like a free floating memory, happens almost like it is happening right now. So that's a flashback associated with PTSD. Desire to check that the environment is safe. Can be OCD, can be agoraphobia. So it's basically something related to anxiety, but it has a specific trigger, the environment. GAD is about free floating anxiety or unspecific anxiety. Okay, and it is continuous, pervasive. So difficulty in seeing objects at a distance is nearsightedness, which is myopia. Hypermetropia is farsightedness, where you see far things clearly. So it is myopia. Okay. Consciously faking illness or symptoms of disability to achieve some non-medical objective is malingering. So if it is any medical objective, so they want to have a diagnosis, it could be hypochondriasis. Because it's non-medical and hypochondriasis is not even here, the answer is malingering. Okay. So in dissociative identity disorder, identity that is frequently encountered with the person's real name is the host. So any other identity apart from the person's original name, which is given, is the alter. It's definitely not ghost identity. So host, right? So which cognitive skill is involved in learning to read? So theory of mind is about what others are thinking, others' thought process. Mental representation is needed to represent what you see, but it is needed for almost everything. It's more of spoken language. To be able to read, you have to associate a sound with the letter and then a sequence of sounds with the word, right? So basically morphemes and then a word. So it's spoken language. What phenomenon explains why individuals can remember the first and last items, recency and primacy? Okay, it's not list position, it's just a layperson's term. Primacy, recency effect is the correct one. So other things also describe it similarly, but this is the commonly used term. Okay. According to Erik Erikson's psychosocial theory, key challenge in adolescence is identity versus role confusion. So it's a moratorium that happens where people are figuring out what they are, what they want to do. It's also because they're stepping into adulthood. They're still treated like a child and they want to be treated like an adult, but they are not treated like an adult, but expected to be that. That is one reason for the role confusion also, apart from choosing what they want to be. Okay. So moving on, stream of consciousness is actually given by William James. You may think it's Wilhelm Wundt because he talked about components of consciousness, but he talked about components. He doesn't say it's a stream. Okay, so it's William James who actually talked about it. So it's not Carl Jung or B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner is a radical behaviorist. He would not have talked about consciousness at all. There are chances that Carl Jung would have talked about it, but as far as I've read, it is not Carl Jung. This is something where you have to say, trust me, bro, sort of a thing. Which part of the brain controls basic life-sustaining functions? So it is the hindbrain. It is not cerebellum as per se, maybe kind of related to it, but it is medulla. So the brain stem. Okay. So thalamus is the relay center. It is the top of the brain stem. It is not related to it. It's kind of a midbrain structure. Hypothalamus is below it, and it is not related to mainly this. It's the medulla. Okay. Which term refers to constancy of a measure? Okay, measure here being a test. So when a test is constant, either temporally or within it, consistent, like part A and part B are measuring the same things, that is consistency. So we call it reliability. Validity is when it is measuring what it is claiming to measure. Generalizability is a kind of external validity, okay, where even in other situations, other populations, the finding is valid. That's not reliability. Sensitivity is something else entirely. Sensitivity is about how accurately a particular diagnostic tool can say this person has this disorder. The opposite is specificity, where they say this person does not have the disorder. That's the probability of it. So that's sensitivity, specificity. So what is described here is reliability. We just have 25 more. We'll rush through this quick. Okay, good. The term anterograde amnesia refers to inability to retrieve new memories, because old memories would be retrograde amnesia. Temporary memory loss, even though we can call it amnesia, it's not amnesia. Inability to process visual stimulus could be cortical blindness, or could be because of various reasons. But what is associated here is anterograde amnesia. Okay. In operant conditioning, the term for when a previously reinforced behavior is no longer reinforced and fades away. That's extinction. Okay. Generalization is you reacting to another stimulus which is similar. So it's related to classical conditioning. Even related to operant conditioning, if you are training another related stimulus and reinforcing it, generalization can happen. Discrimination is the opposite of it. Shaping is where you use a lot of immediate step-by-step reinforcement. That would be shaping. Extinction is where reinforcement is withdrawn, behavior fades and stops. Gradually fades is kind of like throwing you off maybe, but this is extinction. None other options explain it better. Okay. What is the defining feature of somatic symptom disorder? Somatic meaning bodily symptom disorder. So basically, it is not explained by any medical cause. So it's kind of psychogenic in nature. Okay, so physical symptoms like ulcers related to stress, headaches related to stress, all those things related to stress, and it's kind of not explained by any organic cause. Okay, so that is somatic symptom disorder. It's not delusion of grandeur. We already discussed what it is. Obsessive behaviors is about thoughts. It's not somatic. Could be somatic in the way obsession can be somatized, but it's not related to somatic symptom disorder itself. So in social psychology, bystander effect because of diffusion of responsibility, because you think someone else will do. It's not social loafing, because in social loafing there's a common goal. The common goal is, even though you think it's to help, it's not defined. Social loafing is something else. Group polarization is where in a group people kind of go into the polar ideals and very little people or few people are in the middle. Cognitive dissonance is the phenomenon that happens when you have a difference in attitude and behavior or the decision you make, and it does not sit right with you because you believe something, you do something else. So you have cognitive dissonance. So here the answer is diffusion of responsibility. Okay. Which neurotransmitter is most associated with reward and pleasure? Dopamine. Serotonin associated with mood, sleep, kind of for pleasure, but it is not exactly serotonin. Dopamine is the one closely associated with reward. Okay. Okay. Another question. In ADHD, it's not serotonin, it's B. Okay. Another question in ADHD, along with dopamine, another key neurotransmitter is implicated. So which one would that be? Any guesses? It's one of the options. Anyone wants to take a guess? In ADHD, I'm giving another question. Basically, dopamine is implicated with the reward system. So dopamine levels are low, so they don't feel like doing anything. Yeah, it is C, norepinephrine. So in ADHD, arousal can also be lower. So they'll feel drowsy most of the time. Again, that is related to low levels of arousal to do things. Okay, but novel things can trigger both norepinephrine and dopamine. That is why they are more about doing different things which are novel and risky and things like that. Okay, so usual day-to-day things do not respond by increased levels of dopamine or norepinephrine in ADHD. Anyway, we'll move on. Longitudinal and cross-sectional designs can be used to study behavior change as a function of age. Disadvantage of cross-sectional studies is that it is influenced by, it's not random assignment because we are not talking about experimental design here at all. Leave it. Socioeconomic factors, kind of, but there's a specific term for it called cohort. Okay, for example, cross-section is you take different generations. So for example, you take Gen Z, you take millennials, you take Gen X, Y. Okay, Y is millennial, right? Gen X. So now you see their behavioral differences. Okay, so that's a function of age. Along with function of age, it can be influenced by their exposures at that time. Okay, so some people would be more influenced by COVID, right? So some people would not even have been influenced. Like if you talk to people who are like after 2025, given that they can talk, you would not, get the influence of COVID in that generation. So that is called cohort difference. Right, moving on. Yeah, cohort. Rahul thought that he could do much better in English exam as it was in the same classroom where he studied. Whereas in geography, he was nervous because it was conducted in a totally different environment. This is to do with encoding specificity. So it can be with places, or it can be with mood, or it can be with other things like the environment. Basically, that's the environment that is happening here. So if you're in the same learning environment and the retrieval environment is kind of the same, it boosts it. If you're in the same mood, as in like you're happy when you're studying and you're happy when you're writing exams, so the recall is likely to happen better. So that is the encoding specificity. Okay, it's not congruity itself. So this is the layman term. Examination fear may be happening, but it's not the term that is mentioned here. Okay, prosopagnosia is basically for faces. Difficulty in recognizing faces. So it is to do with the fusiform gyrus, especially the right side. It's kind of underneath its, what is the way, ventral, right? So it's in the ventral temporal surface. Distinguishing tastes is also related to the insular lobe, which is considered part of the temporal lobe. It is not prosopagnosia. Expressing feelings through facial expressions, that would be just flat affect, or if it is said as lack of recognition of facial expressions, what is the term for it? Inability to recognize face or one's own emotions, alexithymia, right? And inability to recognize objects is agnosia. So prosopagnosia is a kind of agnosia, inability to recognize faces, not objects itself. Okay. So which formula is correct for degrees of freedom in chi-square? So degrees of freedom is basically the number of values a set of data can take when one or the number of fixed values are taken away. So fixed values are usually the mean. In chi-square, you don't usually have the mean. So you have rows and columns in chi-square. So you usually know the total, and you usually know one of those values. So it is columns minus 1 into rows minus 1. Okay, so if we have 2 columns and 2 rows, basically 2 factors in one variable, 2 factors in another, so it would be 2 columns and 2 rows. So 2 minus 1 into 2 minus 1 would be 1 into 1, 1. Anyway, apart from the confusion, it's columns minus 1 into rows minus 1 for chi-square. Okay. So name of Indian tool to assess severity and disability of children with autism. So it is not screener that is asked. Okay, then you could go with childhood autism scale or MCHAT or something else. It is ISA, Indian scale for assessment of autism. So it is the scale which is used to give the disability level of autism. Okay, so 70 is kind of the cutoff on the scale. And unless you kind of have been in a clinical setting, it may not be possible for you to know this. Okay, so anyone else got a different answer? Okay, Rahul got it correct. Good. So which results design is best suited for examining changes over time in behavior? That would be longitudinal, not cross-sectional, because it is affected by, we already saw, cohort effects. Case study is not even related to changes. Even if you can incorporate in case study, it's n equals to 1, not generalizable. Experimental designs is not particularly, for seeing changes over time, like a longer time. It's longitudinal. What is the main purpose of using meta-analysis? So meta-analysis is basically for pulling all the statistical data of various research studies and finding the mean of the means. So mean of the effect sizes, basically, right? So to summarize findings from multiple studies, but using statistical data. Systematic review also does the same thing, but for qualitative data. So since meta-analysis is used, we can go with this. It is not to do with a single large experiment. It is not to analyze individual case studies or primary data. It's not that. They're actually collecting secondary data here. So the first one, the term which describes experiences characterized disconnection, estrangement from oneself, leading to feelings of unreality regarding one's thoughts, feelings, or identity. Depersonalization, if it was related to the external environment that seems unreal, the sensation seemed dull or too, extremely heightened. So it could be derealization, but this is to do with oneself, one's thoughts, feelings, and identity. It's depersonalization. It's not dissociative amnesia, because that is about not being able to recall particular parts of a memory related to some traumatic incidents and all. Fugue state is where a person loses their identity, moves to another place. It's an episodic thing. Okay. It's depersonalization. Fine. So according to transactional model of stress, which term refers to individual's assessment of whether they have the resources to cope with a stressor or not. So there's an initial threat evaluation according to the model, and then you also appraise, okay, this is a threat, so do I have the resources to cope with it, which is secondary appraisal. So this is basically a layman's term for the same thing. Okay, so this is a layman's term for the first part, so don't get confused by it. Secondary appraisal. So p-value is basically the value that you give for error, how much error is acceptable. So if you repeat, or if you to collect a set of data, you say 5% error is something acceptable. So that is what p-value is. In other words, it's probability that the observed data is proving the null hypothesis. Error is going to tell you whether it's caused by error, chance, or because of actual effect that you studied in the experiment or any study. Null hypothesis tells you there is no difference, right? So if the error is high and there is no difference, so that would be supporting null hypothesis. So that's p-value. The same thing is given here, but it is just to confuse you. So the more specific is observed data that determines that the null hypothesis is true, is what p-value is. Both have the same meaning. I understand if it's confusing, but it's option 2. Okay, just like poor framing of options. Which neurotransmitters involved in regulating mood, appetite, and sleep? Okay. So this one I would like to wait and see how many of you get it right. It's serotonin. Okay, so tell me one disorder where serotonin is implicated in. So what disorder affects mood, your appetite, as well as sleep? Yeah, depression is one. So in depression, people may sleep longer or less, or their appetite could be less or more, and they have pervasive low mood, right? And it is to do with serotonin. Okay. Which psychological theory emphasizes the role of internal mental processes in understanding behavior? Internal mental processes, not behaviorism. Psychoanalysis is about unconscious mental processes, not something in awareness. Humanistic is about potential, so it's cognitive psychology. Okay. So you may get confused with humanistic and psychoanalysis, but it's typically cognitive psychology. Which disorder is characterized by inability to remember important personal information following trauma? We discussed this. So what is the answer? Yeah, B. Dissociative amnesia. you cut off things from your consciousness, especially those parts of your memory which are anxiety provoking or traumatic. So you do not have access to them. That's dissociative amnesia. Okay. Because of trauma, you may be likely to say PTSD, but this is not particularly seen in PTSD. PTSD is a disorder with a specific set of criteria. The criteria being flashbacks, okay, the presence of a life-threatening trauma is one, flashbacks, and avoidance for those triggers. So it is not amnesia per se. In social psychology, what is the difference between conformity and compliance? Conformity is something that happens more automatically. Compliance is in relation to a request. Okay. May not involve peer pressure. Okay, oh, it's the opposite. Compliance does not involve peer pressure. It's just a direct request. Okay, and you comply to it. Conformity is not related to this, not the answer. Both related to obedience. Obedience is not the answer because obedience happens from a point of authority. Conformity, sorry, is not always involuntary. It can be voluntary also. Anyway, so the option is conformity due to social pressure, compliance because of request. Which of the following terms refer to difficulty recalling information due to interference from new information? Okay, so here the new information is affecting previous information. Okay, so which one would it be? It is interference. Is it proactive or is it retroactive? Okay, so whatever is interfered would what we would put. Okay, new information is interfering previous. So what is interfered? Previous. So retroactive would be the right answer. Okay, if the other way around, old information interfering with obtaining new things, that is proactive. All right. So minimum age of assessment for SLD as per RPWD, it's 8 years. You will have to be posted and at least some internship experience to know this. It's 8 years. So which is not a core symptom to diagnose autism in children as per DSM-5. Okay, good. So let's see what you guys say. Communication skills, yeah, it's a key thing. Unusual repetitive behavior, yes. Social reciprocity, it is also criteria communication in ICD-11, kind of similar. IQ below 70 is not a criteria. Okay. So similarly, language is also not a criteria. So if they had given language, so in previous DSM-4 and ICD-11, language was used as a criteria. Okay. So Asperger's is also kind of subsumed under DSM-5 and ICD-11, in which the person does not have intellectual deficits, does not have language deficits. They still are considered to have autism. So language and intellectual deficits are not main criteria, but they are used as specifiers in DSM and ICD. Okay. So after diagnosing with the core symptoms of communication, repetitive behavior, social reciprocity, and or limited range of interests, then you specify whether the person has IQ deficits and or language deficits. Okay. So anyway, D is the answer. All right. Just 2 questions away, or 3, I think. One parent conveys 2 conflicting messages to the child, and that's called double bind communication. I know it is social deficits, but that's not the term. Faulty communication is also makes sense, but that's not the term. It's double bind communication. So there's a lot of theories that say double bind communication is what is implicated in schizophrenia, because the person says, "Hey, I love you," but the person also says, "No, you cannot do things on your own." Okay, so you have to do things my way, but they says, "I love you no matter what." So it's kind of conflicting. So it is very difficult to get out of that bind. Okay, so the anxiety that comes out of the bind is projectively identified with other things. So that's the theory for schizophrenia. Anyway, it's just a theory, but it does have some weight to it. So we'll move on quickly. Process in which therapist expresses negative feelings towards patient is called countertransference. particularly negative countertransference. Okay, there's more specificity here. That's why we're not taking countertransference per se. All right, last one. I'll give you to you. ERP is based on behavior therapy for which, based on which principle? It is not counter conditioning, because in counter conditioning, you make sure they do not respond to that thing and something else happens. In habituation, you repeatedly expose them to it so that they get used to it. Okay, and the response is prevented, basically the escape or neutralizing behavior that is prevented. So the anxiety that comes from OCD, they experience the anxiety and repeated exposure reduces the anxiety and gets extinct. So that's how OCD is treated in ARP or even anxiety disorders. Reciprocal inhibition is not the right term here. That would be for systematic desensitization. Okay. Graded exposure may happen in ERP, but that is not the core principle. Okay, so it is habituation and extinction. All right, guys. Just quickly, so let's see how much you got. Okay, because it's preview, this error is showing. So just tell me how many questions you got right. It's pretty straightforward. 84. There's definitely room for improvement. Okay, but the questions are pretty straightforward. This is what you're going to be faced with. Even for NIMHANS, there's not going to be any twisted, in-depth questions. Only that the options can be confusing. I would say in this paper, the options or alternatives were poorly framed. So one thing literally had null hypothesis repeated twice, just with an other thing. And they also had, like, let's say, counter transference and negative counter transference. I mean, both are correct, right? So they should not be framing questions like this. 89 is good, but then again, we heard the cutoff is 95. That's particularly because even though the paper is so easy, it's going to be like a lot of competition, right? So anyway, so we know that retrieval practices help. We'll have this weekly PYQs, but we'll do it faster because this is not helping discuss other things like interviews or something like that. So you guys will have to read in this week, and we'll meet again this Sunday, the coming Sunday. Okay, so we'll discuss another question paper. So I have, thanks to some of you, I've gotten like so many PYQs that we can, like, discuss and do it quickly. I'll see something that is more challenging rather than like straightforward. I'll search for some institute's paper which is slightly more challenging. Okay, so any doubts or questions in today's session, even the introductory session or what we discussed? I think there's a chance to see fundamental attribution error. I wanted to look at that. Any doubts or questions? Okay, so fundamental attribution error is even more than actor observer. Oh yeah, how to counter the questions that are not necessarily wrong but wrongfully framed. I mean, there's nothing you could do there. It is, you have to be more mindful. Okay, so it is not like only one question will be right. If two questions are right, you have to choose the one which is more appropriate. Okay, so sometimes two questions or two options, sorry, two options can be right. You just have to be more mindful and then choose the one which is more appropriate compared. For example, both counter transference and negative counter transference were correct. So we went with negative counter transference. Or in the other case, probability of null hypothesis, probability of the observed data being, representing null hypothesis is true. Both are kind of the same thing. You just have to go with the more appropriate one or the more, what is the word, appropriate term. Okay, so there may be layperson's term also used, but what is the exact term that authors have used? That would be the usual correct answer. Okay, and yeah, one more thing. negative marking. Okay, so if you've gotten 89 correct, that means you've got 11 wrong, right? So 11 into 0.25, let me do the math quickly using calculator. You lose 2.75 from the 89. Okay, so that would mean you get 86.25. So a lot of people would say a lot of strategies for negative marking, but the best strategy is that you answer every single question. Okay, because let's say you got 11 or let's say 10 questions wrong. Okay, so 20 questions you didn't know. So if you're going to kind of try to strategically do this, because the competition is really high, you have to get 95, right? So if you kind of apply some strategy, one is that you're going to run out of time. You may not be able to strategize for every question. Two, your strategy may itself be faulty in the sense that you may actually know an answer, but you think, oh, I don't know, I'm not confident, let me leave it out in the fear of negative marking. So you will actually leave out answer that you actually know, or you may be so confident about a wrong answer and then keep it also. So that can also happen. So the thing is that you should have adequate preparation so that you can get 90% of the answers correct. The rest 10%, right? So even if you use guessing, okay, let me put 88 for the sake of ease. Just stay with me for the statistics. So 88 questions surely. Okay, you're very confident about that. So the remaining 12 questions, you're not so sure. Okay, so if you use some strategy, you may know, you may not, you may not know. So you will anyway not answer all 100. Okay, so you're kind of afraid in this point of time whether you're going to lose even more marks by answering the 12. It is not the case. You will actually, even by guessing, you'll get more marks. So for example, 12 questions you don't know. Okay, so the chance of getting 12 questions right by guessing is that you will get 3 marks, because 12 by four options, you'll get 3 marks, right? So that means 3 questions you've gotten correct. So 12 minus 3 is 9, right? Now 9 into 0.25. I'm going to use calculator again. 9 into 0.25 is 2.25. Okay, so 3 minus 2.25 still gets you a net positive mark. This is if you guess purely based on guesses. Okay, for 4 options. If you know that 2 options are correct, possibly, okay, and then 2 are definitely wrong, you're cutting it by 50%. So you are increasing the chances of guessing it correct. So even though they're penalizing you for guessing, if you get most of the answers correct because you have studied them properly, let's say 90% or even 85%, the remaining questions, please don't apply any strategies. And as in, please don't leave them out. Otherwise, you will not, be able to reach the cutoff. The cutoffs are really, really high. All right. So does this strategy make sense? No strategy is the strategy here. Does anyone have a doubt in this? Yeah, sure. Okay, so please don't apply any strategy for negative marking, but make sure you're going to answer 90% of the questions correctly. Be confident that much. So that is to do with, do you attempt questions where all 4 options seem anxious? Yeah, you do have to attempt. If your confidence is that you have not even heard of this, then you may leave it out. You've not even heard of this question at all. It's like some Greek and Latin, then you may leave it out, right? But ideally, just guess. Okay, make educated guesses also. That's fine, right? But if you do not know more than 20 questions, that is to do with your preparation. No matter what strategy you use for the rest 20, I don't think so it will be possible for you to get into it. So you have to make sure you study so well that you know about 90% of the questions correct. Okay, so answer all 100 questions. and also prepare so well that you know 90% of it, right? Fine. Now we'll stop. Any other doubts or questions?